Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The FBI and Justice Department are being urged to renew its investigation into one of the most shocking political murders in recent U.S. history. 28 years ago this month, on October 11, 1985, a prominent Palestinian-American leader named Alex Odeh was killed by a powerful pipe bomb planted at the Santa Ana, California offices of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, where Odeh worked as the group's Western Regional Director. 7 people were injured in the blast. The bombing made national news. These are some of the news clips featured in recent online documentary.
An act of terror right here at home in Orange County.
Yes, that is the corner office of what used to be the headquarters, as you mentioned, of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, the 1900 block of 17th Street in Santa Ana, suite number 208. That is all that is left of that suite.
Today, the Santa Ana office of the committee was destroyed by a bomb. Odeh was killed, and 7 other people were injured.
And some fear international terrorism may be taking root here.
The man who was killed by that blast, Alex Odeh, age 41, married, the father of 3 young daughters. The bomb was powerful enough to shatter glass in several other offices.
Debris was everywhere. The wall was blown out. The windows were blown out. It looked like a combat zone.
Today, at Western Medical Center, where Odeh died, his brother Sammy told of numerous death threats received by his brother.
I don't have an idea who done it, but as I said in the past, he had received some threatening calls from people identifying themselves as JDL.
The FBI quickly named the militant JDL, that's the Jewish Defense League, as a focus of its investigations in the murder of Alex Odeh. But 28 years later, no one has been questioned or indicted. Just hours before he was killed, Odeh appeared on Nightline debating a member of the JDL. Shortly after Odeh's killing, JDL's chair, Irv Rubin, said, quote, "I have no tears for Mr. Odeh. He got exactly what he deserved." The JDL was linked to a wave of bombings in the United States in the 80s and is now considered a terrorist group by the U.S. government. The American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee recently joined with the NAACP and several prominent members of Congress to push for the FBI to do more to solve the case. Ben Jealous, the outgoing president of the NAACP, likened the Odeh case to that of Medgar Evers, the civil rights activist killed in 1963 in Mississippi. It took 30 years to bring his assassin, Byron de la Beckwith of the Ku Klux Klan, to justice. To talk more about the killing of Alex Odeh, we're joined by 3 guests. Attorney Albert Mokhiber, former president of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, was legal director of the ADC when Alex was killed. Abdeen Jabara is with us in New York, civil rights attorney here. He helped found the ADC and was vice chair of the committee at the time. He was also involved in a groundbreaking court case in the 70s that forced the National Security Agency to acknowledge it had been spying on him since 1967. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And we're staying with Democratic Congressmember John Conyers of Michigan, who is calling for an investigation. Let's begin with Albert Mokhiber. Take us back to October 11th, 1985, Albert. Tell us exactly what you understand happened.
Well, Alex routinely opened the office door that day, and unfortunately, as you had mentioned, there was a very sophisticated tripwire bomb attached, and as he opened the door, it was just blown to pieces. Unfortunately, despite 28 years of knocking on the doors of justice, we have not found it yet. And Alex was a very peaceful man. He was known as a activist in not just in the Arab American movement and Palestinian issues, but civil rights in general. So whether it was South Africa, whether it was Native American issues, he was there. And in fact, many Jewish American organizations were engaged in various types of dialogue with Alex and supported us at the outset of this investigation. And we're happy to see people like Jewish Voices for Peace continuing that with us. But it was quite a shock. And we think quite honestly, that was probably the reason why Alex was targeted, because he didn't represent what the media or popular culture wanted to see out of Arabs. He was a very refined guy who spoke very passionately but very eloquently on issues of common cause. He didn't brandish a weapon. His MO was dialogue, and that elimination of Alex's voice sent a shock throughout the community, and it was a very chilling effect. It took years for people to come back to the organization and to this whole issue. Talk about who Alex Odeh was, Albert. Well, Alex was a poet. He was a published poet, and he was a father of 3 beautiful young girls, and his wife Norma was left a widow to raise these kids. And Alex's family was first and foremost for him. I mean, if you just look at the photos of him, he was happiest sitting at home with his family and friends. But he was also dedicated to his homeland. He came from a little town called Jifna, a Palestinian Christian town. His sister was a nun, and he was very dedicated to the principles of civil and human rights. So he would take trips back home, and I remember on a number of occasions I would contact the State Department in advance to let them know he's coming, to make sure he wasn't hassled at the borders because of the work he had done with ADC. But despite all of that, despite the fact that he did everything according to the book, he was still targeted and eliminated in a very savage way. This was one of the first acts of terrorism in the United States surrounding the Middle East crisis. And there were 2 other bombings that year of ADC offices. Prior to that, in August, our office was bombed, and 2 police officers were actually trying to defuse the bomb, and it blew up on camera, and they were both disabled. Fortunately, they survived, but it was a horrible situation. Then, of course, on October 11, 1985, Alex was assassinated. And then back here in D.C., our headquarters on November 29th were also bombed. And that, I don't think, was a coincidence. That was the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. Nobody in any of those 3 bombings has ever been brought to justice. And this is why we've redoubled our efforts in the memory of Alex and for his family and his 3 daughters. Nobody should have this case go for that long without any resolution. And like Mciver, we're hoping that eventually, hopefully it won't take 30 years, maybe we'll get it done before that, that we will get a resolution. And I must say, and I'm indebted to Congressman Conyers, because from the outset, he has always stood with us, steadfast, in trying to seek justice in this case, and we're very pleased to see that he's still here in Congress and will be helping us yet again to try to bring a resolution to this case. I want to turn to comments made by the president of the ADC in Los Angeles at the time of Alex Odeh's murder. This is David Habib.
Alex Odeh was killed as an American in America because we dare to speak what is for some people an unpopular truth. That Arabs are people too, that Arab Americans are Americans too, and that all Americans are entitled to all the rights and privileges of being an American. This reprehensible crime threatens the security of all Americans everywhere and must not go unsolved.
Shortly after the bombing, the Associate Deputy Director of the FBI testified before Congress about the attack and the likely perpetrators. This is Oliver Revelle.
At this point, we have insufficient credible evidence to bring charges, so these individuals remain as suspects, and as such, they're, of course, entitled to due process and have the same constitutional rights as anyone else. So we are unable to, before this body, to name these individuals or to even associate them with a particular group. We have characterized them as members of a Jewish extremist element.
That was testimony before Congress. Congressmember John Conyers, you were a congressman at the time. This was 20 years into your term in Congress, and now, more than close to 30 years later, you are calling for an investigation once again. What happened then? Where was the investigation, and what will be different now?
Well, that's going to turn in large part on how Eric Holder, the Attorney General, wants to have his legacy viewed as he prepares to leave the top position in the Attorney General's office. the fact of the matter is that this is an embarrassment. They haven't even dismissed the witnesses or the suspects involved, and it's like they just put this into a closet and locked the door. And thanks to Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez and others in the Progressive Caucus and the Congressional Black Caucus and other individuals, we're saying we don't want President Obama and the Department of Justice to leave this case as if it never happened. We want a hearing in the Judiciary Committee, or I'll hold a forum if I don't get a hearing. But we've got to get into this, and I'm going to be working closely with Eric Holder, who I believe is sensitive to the position that's being raised by many of us now.
I wanted to bring in Abdeen Jabara. You were the vice chair of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee at the time. You were a close friend also of Alex Odeh. Talk about what the ADC was doing at the time.
Well, the ADC was in the process of organizing Arab Americans around the country. They were engaged in setting up chapters and opening offices and trying to raise issues of import to that community. And at the head of those was the continuing problem of the oppression of the Palestinian people.
And Alex Odeh had come from the West Bank.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the pattern at the time, what was taking place. I want to go to a quote of the JDL. The day after Alex was murdered, Jewish Defense League chair Irv Rubin brushed off the attack, saying, quote, "I'm certainly not going to lose any sleep over it." Later, Rubin was harsher, saying, quote, "No Jew or American should shed one tear for the demise of Mr. Odeh. Regarding the death of Mr. Odeh, unfortunate as may be, as they say, what goes around comes around," he said. In 2002, Rubin died in jail while awaiting trial on charges stemming from an attempt to blow up a mosque in California. Talk about the wave of terror in the United States at the time.
Yes, I would like to talk about that, because this is part and parcel of a whole pattern and a history that occurred. You have to remember that the founder of the JDL, Meir Kahane, was an FBI informant in the 1950s. He used a pseudonym to infiltrate the John Birch Society, and he was a paid informant for the FBI. He did not start the JDL until 1968. And from that time on, if one had a rap sheet, you would see, and I printed this out from the internet, over 20 pages of bombings, assaults, fire bombings, killings, etc., that were occurring in the United States, because the JDL became the shock troops for those people that wanted to pressure the Soviet Union to release, give visas to Jewish members of Soviet Jews to go to Israel. And that's what one of the principal things that the JDL was doing. This had a large political resonance, and the JDL got an enormous amount of support. They got a lot of money. They were able to fudge a lot of the criminal charges that were brought against them. Kahane was put on probation. During holidays, he was released to go out and celebrate the holidays when he was in prison, things like that. So you have to understand this in terms of that context. Now, they turned their attention to Arab American organizing in this country because they saw that as a threat. And they thought, we will target some of the Arab American organizations, which the ADL was the largest, and actually the most successful in trying to help organize Arab Americans. and they thought that we would fold if several of our members were killed or assaulted, and that they would intimidate us from continuing this organizing effort. So that's I think the larger context in which this occurred. As you know, Kahane ultimately moved to Israel, joined, started a political party, etc., and his people in Israel continued to do this. The gentleman who attacked the Muslims praying at the Ibrahimi Mosque was a member of his organization. He killed 27 or 28 people while they were praying. So, can
you talk about Robert Manning of
yes,
the JDL?
I can talk about Robert Manning. Robert Manning, he's currently in prison. His wife was finally extradited after a long extradition process, but she passed away. And Manning has never been questioned about this murder, to the best of our knowledge. We do know, however, that in 2006, another gentleman, whose name was Eric Krogel, did give names to the FBI about people who he said were involved in the assassination of Alex Odeh. And those people are living now not in Israel, but in Israel-occupied territory, in a settlement called Kiryat Arba. And you know, since that time...
Kiryat Arba is right near Ramallah, right?
Yes. And since that time, of course, Israel has negotiated an extradition treaty with the United States, and it makes anyone who's a dual national, there's a lot of hoops that they have to go through to gain extradition of someone from Israel.
The JDL did not only target Palestinians. I want to ask about the case of the Jewish impresario, performing arts promoter, Saul Hirak. In 1972, a bomb was planted in Saul Hirak's Manhattan office. It exploded, killing Iris Konis and injuring several others, including Hirak. Iris was his secretary. The bombing had been arranged by the JDL, which opposed U.S. tours of artists from the Soviet Union.
Yes, yes. Like I said, the JDL was the shock troops in an attempt to help put a lot of pressure on the Soviet Union to allow, and of course, ultimately, that was, you know, the political side of that was the Jackson-Vanik Amendment in Congress, where Senator Jackson from Washington State passed this legislation that would deny trade benefits to the Soviet Union if they did not allow free Jewish emigration out of the Soviet Union. Of course, this was very helpful to Israel because they wanted to ingather the Jews. That's their whole modus operandi. Of course, that the Soviet Union had a large Jewish population, and they wanted to increase the Jewish population in Israel. And so there's a lot that was going on here in terms of the JDL and the people that were backing it. It is not merely just a small cult group that was operating. It got a great deal of support.
We have a lot more to talk about. We're going to go to break and come back. The day of his assassination, Alex Odeh was scheduled to speak at Shabbat services at Congregation B'nai Tzedek, a synagogue in Fountain Valley. Want to ask about why the investigation was dropped and what it means to reopen it right now. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. We're speaking with Albert Mokhiber and Abdeen Jabara, both formerly with the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, and with Congressmember John Conyers, one of the longest-serving Congress members ever. He's just celebrated nearly 50 years in Congress. He's calling for, along with Loretta Sanchez of the Orange County area, Congressmember Sanchez, a reopening of the investigation of the assassination of Alex Odeh. Stay with us.